and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. I am your host, Scott Daly, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host and unwelcome relative from out of town. It's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
I'm not sure what that reference has to do with the Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift, but I'm doing pretty good.
Matt, no. You were supposed to watch Tokyo Story. Story.
Well, I'm sure the two movies are similar enough. We can...
We'll find out.
Make something work.
Yeah. This week on the show, our ongoing series Blind Spots continues as we go through the 10 selected films from the BFI Sight and Sound 2022 critics poll that contains the top, I think actually it has the top 250 films of all time. We're picking the 10 that we haven't seen, hence the name. This week we are on my fifth and final pick. We're going to be talking about the 1953 Japanese film Tokyo Story. Matt, Story.
Okay, I got it now.
Then after that, we have some homework to do. We forgot last week, Matt, that the episode before we had done a Canon episode on Big Fish, and we forgot to talk about the results of the poll. So we're going to handle that in this week's episode. And then I wanted to talk to you about some streaming news, Matt. You know how we love talking about those streamers.
It is fun.
Things are starting to happen, and I thought it'd be fun to talk about it.
All right.
But first, let's get into our main segment of the week and talk about Tokyo Story. Matt, what is this movie all about?
This movie is about an old couple that visits their children and grandchildren in the city, but receive little attention.
This movie was written by Kogo Noda and Yasujirō Ozu. It is, of course, directed by Yasujirō Ozu. It is number 4 on the BFI Sight and Sound poll. It is the highest number of all the films we picked. I believe it was like at one point number 1 on this list, actually. So, one of the most generally beloved films of all time. And my pick for my final film, I'd never seen an Ozu film. I'd heard so much about him as a master filmmaker, and I thought starting with the best would be a great place to start. So, Matt, I'm really curious. What did you think about Tokyo Story?
I really enjoyed it. I think I need to watch it a second time, though, because I think my stance going into the movie was incorrect. And I'll explain what I mean. Like, I try not to find out too much about a movie before I watch it because I don't want to be biased or I just want to have a sort of pure experience of like what do I, me, the person I am, feel about this, not what does some critic think that I should be thinking about it, right? And that usually works and serves me properly. But the problem with this movie is I kept like waiting for the plot to start. And then I belatedly realized, like, oh, it is exactly just that summary I read. An old couple visit their children. They don't get a lot of attention. They go home. Then the mother dies unexpectedly from, I guess, being old and stressed out. And it's sad. Mm-hmm. And that's the plot. Like that's the entire plot. And like it's really more of it's a minimalist film. It's a film about these characters, none of whom are incredibly dramatic characters. They're all just like very normal people experiencing very normal emotions. Everything is subdued and realistic, very, very realistic, very minimalist. And then I realized, sort of far too late in the game, I was like, okay, well, that's what's genius about it is it's taking this kind of snapshot of humanity, nothing about which is like enormously dramatic and over the top. It's just like, well, this is dramatic. It's just a thing that everyone goes through, and it's treating it with sort of love and patience and attention to detail. And that's why it's a great movie. So a weird way of giving you my reaction, because it's just like for the first half of the movie I was just kind of like confused about what was happening. It's so simple. It sounds stupid to say I was confused. It's like, well, I was confused because I was expecting it to sort of behave like a normal movie. Yeah. And it kind of wasn't that. So
sure. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, that is, I kind of intentionally told you nothing about Ozu going into this, but that is one thing I knew about Ozu is his films are not like your typical narrative. They are very much, slice of life, just little plot, type stories. And I knew that going into this. I knew this was a story about family, broadly. I was a little worried because I figured, this is a Japanese movie. It's about a Japanese family. And I was like, is this going to be one of those things where like it is so specific to, both this place and time, the 50s, just less than a decade after the end of World War II, and this culture that I frankly just don't know very much about, that I'm just not going to be able to tap into this thing in any kind of real way. I was really worried about that going into it. And I think one of the most remarkable things about this movie to me is that this movie is that it is very specific to this culture and this time and this place, but it's also like incredibly universal at the same time.
Mm.
It is a movie about a Japanese family in the 1950s. It is also just a movie about family in general, and the ways in which family interacts, especially the complex, often dramatic and difficult interactions between adult children and their parents. And I was pretty blown away by this movie. It's not the type of thing that like I guess it didn't hit me emotionally really. Like I didn't get like weepy or upset, but I was just kind of just enthralled the whole time by a lot of the very clever things that I think this movie is doing, with performances, with camera movements, with how the story is being laid out in front of us. I was just kind of really, really, really impressed. Like you automatically understand why this guy is considered one of the greatest Japanese directors for sure, and one of the greatest directors in general of all time.
Hmm.
Okay, just absolutely great movie. Like I think we have some listeners that like haven't heard of the movies we're talking on, especially on this Blind Spot series, and like poke their ears in, to listen for just the first few minutes. And I'm going to tell y'all right now, like stop what you're doing and go watch this movie. I think it's well worth your time.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's something interestingly like anachronistic about the way it's filmed, where it's a very modern feeling sensibility in terms of like shot selection, but
Hmm.
then like the camera is obviously this like rickety piece of crap from 70 years ago that barely works. I mean,
Yeah.
it's black and white. It's like the frame is sort of jittering constantly.
Hmm.
um the audio quality is just objectively not the best, but it's like it's somebody with a very modern eye using tools that were super ancient and
Yeah.
probably not the best quality and so forth. And so it's just an interesting experience where part of you is like, this doesn't really feel like a movie made in the um early 50s, not,
Well,
yeah.
it's weird because Ozu, like he's really into static cameras, right? Like
Hmm.
his camera does not move. I think maybe one time in this movie, I can't even remember when it happens. Maybe zero times this camera moves. He sets up his camera and he does a shot, and it's not like there's some versions of that where I think we talked about this with Kurosawa, where like he had a lot of very static shots, but like they were long take shots where it's just characters in like a wide or a mid just talking to each other. This movie has a lot of very static shots, but it's cutting between not over the shoulder shots, which you would typically do in conversation shots, but like character center frame, almost but not quite looking down the lens when they're talking to each other. Um, Very interesting, and
Yeah.
like really allowed you to focus on the face of the person. And this is a movie in which people are saying a whole lot, but they are saying even more with how they're saying it, and what they're not saying. Like and this is one of those things, like I don't want to, I want to be careful here because I don't want to make like too broad, like this is Japanese culture type thing. But I think part of this is in the ways in which characters don't say what they're thinking and kind of hide what they're thinking behind a smile or oh no, no, stop it.
Hmm.
Like this is a family that almost never like comes right out and says what they are feeling and meaning to each other. Like they just like it is one of the most awkward situations in the world where like you're starting the movie and the elderly couple gets to their daughter's or their son's house, and it's like people meeting for like the second time, it feels like, right? It's like
Hmm.
it's so stilted. Nobody seems like super happy to see each other. Like there's no like huge embraces and loving hug. Like there's none of that, right? It's just
Yeah.
very orderly, very controlled, very smiling, while also you can tell that the kids are exaggerated by the fact that they're not exaggerated. They're exasperated by the fact that their parents are here. They really don't want them here. Their lives are busy and they really don't want them here. But like they're my parents and I love them, and so it's remarkable in how all that's filmed and
Yeah.
to convey that kind of stuff.
And there's all this baggage that you don't understand the full context of the baggage from the beginning, but
Yeah.
it's allowed to sit in kind of, there is baggage, and but part of it is just that they they don't really go to visit their parents often at all. You get the sense, and
Yeah,
their
I think
parents.
there's an implication that the one eldest grandchild
Mhm,
they said is in like middle school,
mhm.
and the implication is that the grandparents have never met that kid.
Yeah,
So like they don't see each other at all, basically.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so that's part of the baggage, is like the parents feeling disappointed that that's the case, but not wanting to sort of come down hard on the kids, just sort of being like actually wounded by it. Like I think that's
Hmm.
actually the good thing the movie does, is it doesn't sort of round out to like comedy where it's like it's like an easy, it's like, I think it's common enough in movies to be like, to sort of make the wounds something that can be easily healed within the frame of an hour and a half film, where it's like, oh,
Hmm.
you don't see me often enough, but we're gonna hang out and it's gonna all be better and we're gonna be happily, but by the end of this movie where everything's gonna be healed, the wounds are gonna be mended, and it's like, no, the parents are like genuinely wounded that their kids haven't really treated them the way they kind of expected them to treat them, and the kids actually, for their part, feel bad about the way they've treated their own parents, but like not bad enough to change their
Yeah, but
behavior.
not bad enough to do anything about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is such an honest human thing. There's so many little things in the movie which are sort of like snippets and vignettes of just truth.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about even just simple stuff. You probably haven't got to experience much of this yet, but just like your kid choosing the moment when your parents are around to throw just the worst tantrum ever, or just be totally recalcitrant and
Yeah.
uncooperative, way worse than normal, and you're like, what the hell? You're giving them the impression that you're like an awful kid and I'm an awful parent, and it's not even fair. Why are you doing this to me? And it's like,
Yeah.
it's and then but like you don't even know until that happens that like you have this sort of chip on your shoulder about like showing your parents that you're a good parent,
Right. Yeah.
and like the movie has that, and like 50 other little things. I can't even remember all of them, little moments
Yeah.
that are expressing something real, about uh, the parent child relationship and the dynamics that arise here as the children grow up. It's just, I think that's what makes it a great movie fundamentally, is
Yeah.
it's communicating all of this truth.
I think I think you're right. And I mean the one big thing is here like this universal truth of what it's like when your parents come to visit, right? And this is, and I'm gonna say this with a caveat that like both of our parents will listen to this podcast, so I'm gonna choose my words carefully here. My both my parents and my in-laws live about 45 minutes away, so I don't experience like the my parents are coming to town for the week thing like is
Uh-huh.
experienced in this film. But I did have grandparents that would visit that all lived out of town and they would come for a week or so. So I experienced some of it, right? And I think there's just some general like I love what you said about like that your kids choose this moment to act out, because there's something about when your parents come to visit that does activate all these insecurities about it. It's like you never notice how dirty your car is until your dad's sitting in your car with you. And then you're like, shit, this is a really dirty car. Um, like you never notice how shitty you did cutting your lawn until your
Uh-huh.
dad's walking through your front lawn. Like this is
Uh-huh.
just like things that when your parents like all these things you weren't even thinking about in your daily busy life, that suddenly you're just and they don't even have to say anything. That's the wild thing. It's not like
Right.
I'm not even putting this on my parents. I'm putting this on myself. It's just
Yeah.
like
Exactly.
this is a thing. This is a thing we do, and I think this movie captures this perfectly. Also, this idea that when people come to visit you, but you're just also still living your life, right?
Uh-huh.
Like they are there to see you, but you have to go to work and the kids have to go to school and like all the normal daily busy life things that you have to do are still carrying on. And it's this awkward tension of a situation where like and I don't want to come down too hard on the kids in this movie. I mean, I think I think they care about their parents and they're trying, but they have a lot of baggage from their childhood, as anyone does, and they also have very busy lives. And like sometimes you just want to grab these kids and shake them and be like, they don't want to go on a tour of Tokyo. They're here to see you.
Uh-huh.
Like they don't want to go to a spa. They want to hang out with you. Like, and it's just like they're not realizing that or not wanting to realize that because that's painful. That's hard. I don't want to have those conversations. I don't want to have this awkward one-on-one like the daughter-in-law has to do with her mother-in-law.
Yeah.
It's just all, it feels so real and universal, like I
Yeah.
said.
One thing I was thinking about a little bit was like, I wonder what I would have thought of this movie if I watched it when I was like 15, and I wonder what I would think of this movie if I watch it again when I'm like 65.
Mm,
And I bet those are two different experiences, because we're like the ages of the, the children of we're the middle generation
yeah.
age here.
Hmm.
And so we resonate most, or rather I think we empathize most with like their position. And I don't even mean that in the sense of like I think they're the good guys. I just
Hmm.
automatically slot myself in there, and weirdly enough sort of see the dad character as like he's our dad in the movie, right?
Uh-huh.
Whereas if you were his age, then you would be him, and then the younger kids would be your kid character. It's all relative to kind of
Yeah.
where you're sitting, which I think is interesting. um yeah yeah, just so many situations that hurt.
Yeah. I mean, really do like I the the mother-in-law daughter-in-law scenes are like so like obviously their son has died in World War II
Mhm.
or has gone missing. They don't actually, they torturously just is missing in action and they don't
Mhm.
know, but it's been almost a decade and they're basically assuming at this point that he's dead. And like the daughter, it's such an interesting choice in the movie to make the daughter-in-law basically be the one that you know is the most attentive to their needs and their wants and them in general, right? And it's because, I mean, it's because for a whole lot of reasons, like the responsibility she feels as the wife of their son, like the she feels sorry for them, and she's also just kind of lost in her own life,
Right.
and they're a connection to her husband that she's lost. And like but the scenes between them are just like some of the best encapsulation of what in-law relationships are, right? Like where it's just like you're kind of just talking to each other and like smiling through your teeth and
Uh-huh.
things. Like the one-on-one relationship between the mother and daughter-in-law, which I think gets rather beautiful at the end of it, is just like I'm just sitting here like imagining like I'm dead and my wife's talking to my mom about, and my mom's talking to my wife about how I'm worried about you. I think it's time you move on and marry someone else. And like how awkward that would be
Uh-huh.
for her, how
Yeah.
like painful that would be for her.
It is awkward, but once again, I love that it's never sort of played for comedy. I kind of, toward the beginning of the movie, I thought we were going to go in a more comedic direction, because like the 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 mother, I don't know anybody's names, I'm sorry. The mother can be kind of overbearing, or maybe sort of puts her foot in her mouth sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Their daughter is like extremely she's just very forthright. Like in a movie where nobody says what they mean, she's just constantly just saying exactly what she thinks, and it comes off as rude, actually.
Yeah.
But you
I
get the
think I
sense.
think my favorite is like, oh, when she's like talking about how, yeah, my mom was like really fat when
Yeah.
when we were younger, and actually I was like super embarrassed about it. And you're like, that's mean.
Yeah.
That's really mean to your mother.
Yeah, yeah, and so like, but so the it's very easy for that to slide into she's an exaggerated trope of a rude, ungrateful daughter character. But
Hmm.
they stayed this side of the line where it's like, no, they're people like that. That's just like
Yeah.
a person. That's a type of person. There's no
Hmm.
comedy here. It's, and interestingly, like she was just as sad as anybody when her mother died,
Yeah.
but then she kind of like was immediately asking for her stuff, which is also not so unrealistic for that type of person,
Yeah.
and not necessarily incompatible with genuine grieving. It's
Yeah.
just like, oh, I want her kimono because I miss her, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, everyone grieves in different ways, right? And they express that grief differently. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I agree. Like, I think that's the remarkable thing is that there's a version of this movie where you hate the kids, where
Mhm,
you really
mhm.
resent the kids. That they obviously, there's an interpretation of this movie that like they didn't appreciate their parents and they didn't realize how important family and these kind of interactions were until they lost their mom. But that's not really what the movie is, right? Because
Yeah.
they all just go home at the end still. Like
Yeah.
they go home after she dies, they say goodbye to her, and then they just leave and they just leave their father alone back in their hometown again and just carry on with their lives. And the daughter-in-law character, I think, says something pretty profound in that just like this is just what happens. Like this is just there is this invariably this pulling apart between parent and child, and I will hope that I have a better relationship with my children as adults than these people have. But this just kind of inevitably happens in life,
Yeah.
and it's not fair, and it sucks. Like I forget what her line was. It was like, isn't that awful? She's like, yep,
Uh-huh.
yep, it is. It's awful.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah, yeah, it's true. I mean, I this movie is specifically about the parent-child relationship, obviously, but I've always thought it was sort of awful that like we as people form a variety of like extremely close and meaningful relationships over the course of our lives, and inevitably 99% of those relationships kind of die off eventually.
Yeah,
You know, some of them take longer than others. The amount of time it takes to keep a human friendship slash relationship alive over the course of decades and decades is pretty extreme. And
hmm,
the parent child bond is no different from any of those others in that sense. I mean, it's got
yeah,
this extra context associated with it, but it's still just because they're your parent doesn't mean that like magically um I don't know that any of those sort of procedural, sort of logistical problems are solved.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I,
like yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just thinking about. I mean, it's sort of a microcosm of what we're talking about, but like, and it also resonated with stuff I've experienced where, you've got the scenes where the parents they're either arriving or they're settling in, and they're like, you're sure we're not putting you out, you're sure this isn't inconvenient for you, and the child, the adult child character is like, no, it's totally fine. And it's like the maddening thing about that interaction is always like the parent can never really know whether their child is being honest there,
Uh huh.
and like even if their child is like totally honestly like, yes, I'm glad you're here, this is great, I'm glad to see you. It's like, well, they have to say that.
Yeah. Right.
so
Yeah.
so it's there's so much communication in the film that is basically like filler and bullshitting,
Yeah. Hmm.
and that's so much of what happens with really, I mean, yeah, yes, parents and children who haven't seen each other in a while, but really any friend you haven't seen in a while, there's so much like I guess we have to like reset the table to get, and it takes so long to get back to a place where you can just kind of have a conversation like you used to, if you can ever even get back to that. In some cases you
Yeah,
can't.
and I don't know if I really believe this family ever was able to have those kind of
Mhm.
actual deep, meaningful, like let's talk about the way we feel and our relationship type conversations, right?
Mhm.
I don't think so. I mean, there's a lot of things, as you said, like in between the things that they're saying, like the father when they were younger had a drinking problem.
Mm-hmm.
And like, again, they like talk about it through smiling mouths
Mm-hmm.
about how, oh yeah, he would go out and get really, really drunk, and then I'd have to come take care of him when he came home, and this like happened all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just like smiling while they're talking about it, but you can see the pain and the anger behind that, and the kids resent their father for this a lot. They do, but they could never tell him that. Not really. I mean, the most they can tell him is like, be careful. Like, I love he in this movie, he goes out and gets drunk with friends again, and the kids are pissed off at him for it at the next day. Like, they're mad at him, and like
Mm-hmm.
the most they can say is like, how's your headache?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, oh, it's better. There's a good lesson there. Like, they
Mm-hmm.
can never directly say, hey, drunk, stop,
Yeah.
stop it, stop
Yeah.
doing that. Like, none of these people talk to each other about anything. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, their son is dead, right? And like,
Mm-hmm.
the most they say about it is through like a smiling, like the mother-in-law says like, I'm so happy to be sleeping in my dead son's bed. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, are you kidding me? like that's what you're gonna say here? It's just like no one is talking about anything, and
Yeah.
yet they are, because it's in the background there. Just like the resentment that this is the first time they've seen their grandchildren, and that this is like they had to come to Tokyo to see their kids. Like that resentment is there.
Yeah.
And it does finally come out at the end, but not to the kids, just to each other. Like,
Right.
only when the parents are alone with each other can they talk about the way they feel about their children.
Yeah, I guess that's a great opportunity to talk about the performances. I mean, it's all great, and it especially the two older parents. And it's great in that perfectly naturalistic way where, there's no great scene, there's no cathartic climax where we build toward it, and people finally say what they mean, and cry and hug. It's always just like they're very emotionally repressed. Like you said, they will complain to each other about certain things, but they'll never complain to their children. It's complex, and they're even sort of working out their feelings about it. And it's all being portrayed through this very subtle frame.
Mm-hmm.
The father character I love, because he's I don't know, he's so nuanced, because it's like sometimes you feel like maybe he's kind of a weak man, but then you feel like, well, that's not fair. I think he just like really cares about his kids and wants them to be happy. And the only disappointment he feels is that they're not, happier, basically, and
Mm-hmm.
that's not disappointment in them. And also he does a lot of, I don't know how to articulate it. Actually, it's just like he feels more like a real person than a character. And I can say the same about really most of the characters.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think he does also have some resentment about their success. Like I think the line that stuck out with me was like when he goes and sees his son's this big doctor, and he's like, oh, but he's only like a small town, like, it's just this tiny little clinic, right? It's just like, he's not like this big impressive doctor, he just has this little clinic. And it's like, that's certainly impressive, and you should be impressed by it. But like, I don't know, you have this image in your head of what you want your children to be. Obviously you want your children to be more successful than you want them to be rich and always happy and everything. And the disappointment that you feel when you realize, if you haven't seen them in a while, like they haven't here, oh, they're just people. my kids are just people, and they're of average success. I think the line the mother gives is like, well, they're certainly above average, right? Which is just like, that's a good thing, but also like, you don't want your kids to just barely be above average. You want them to be great and wonderful and the happiest and the most successful and all these things.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, so I agree, they're disappointed that they're not happier, but there's a little bit of that, I want you to be a rich CEO, son.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. I think like I'm also thinking about the scene where he's talking to his friend at the bar, and his friend is just very overtly like, God, I'm so disappointed in my worthless son. He's only like an assistant to the regional manager. He's not even assistant regional manager. and um and like that's probably when he's the most overtly like, yeah, I mean, I also thought my son was more successful than it turns out that he was.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says like, but we shouldn't be so hard on them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I think he genuinely feels both of those sentiments. Like he
Yep. I
genuinely
agree.
feels a kind of disappointment, but he also is like, I I don't want to take that out on him. Like this is the life that he has. He's a doctor. That's, good for him, right?
Yeah.
And just all, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because it's like, we, especially in Western culture, we sort of valorize the idea of like communication.
Mm-hmm.
Like you should tell people how you feel. I don't think a father should tell his son, I'm disappointed that you're only a doctor. Like I think that's cruel.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything productive. I don't think there's any kind of productive conversation to be had there. Even if he were to be like, son, I'm really, struggling with this emotion that I have that I don't endorse or approve of, but the emotion is that I'm disappointed in you. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's no way to communicate that's healing.
Yeah.
And there's actually a lot of that. There's actually a lot of things that you should never say to people in life.
Yeah.
And the movie juggles a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there's extremes, right? I think this is one end of the extreme of not saying anything, but I agree. Like oversharing everything is probably too much. That's putting a lot of pressure on your kids,
Yeah.
to live up to your ridiculous expectations if you're just constantly communicating those expectations
Well,
to them. But I think the other
yeah.
side of that is like you should communicate something to them. Like
Yeah.
I think it would be fair in this moment for the parents to be like, hey, I just want you to know, like, we love you and we're a little bummed that we don't get to see you more often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like, I'm not asking you to like come live in my hometown again or like come visit once a month or whatever, but just like, could you like prioritize us just a little bit more, or at least on our visit when we came here, we took this train, like, just hang out with us just a little tiny bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I feel like I don't remember exactly who said what, but I feel like after the mother dies, one of the children is like, oh, we could have taken care of them. They could have lived with us. And then yet, despite the fact that they said that, there was no overture made toward the father of like,
Well, yeah, no, what they actually said, Matt, wonderfully, is like, I was kind of hoping he would die first
uh-huh,
because then we could take mother back to Tokyo and take care of her there.
uh-huh.
And the other one's just like, yeah, he's gonna be so lonely here.
Yeah.
And like, I'm just imagining myself in the scene as like the John Travolta gif, just going like, what? You could do that, but I mean,
Yeah.
again, this is weird gender like politics stuff of like that is not something that they even consider would be an acceptable thing. The father probably would not even accept that. But then, we get these shots of him at the very end of the movie, these incredibly lonely shots of him just sitting there by himself. And then that random neighbor coming over and being like, "Oh, yeah, I heard your wife died. Man, you're going to be so lonely forever."
Yeah.
And him just being like, "Yep,
Yeah.
wish I was nicer to my wife before she died." The end.
Yeah. I love like so much of his character is communicated through little like sighs and sounds.
Yeah.
And I love that like that particular moment that the other character walks away, and it's maybe one of the few moments when the camera is just sitting with one character by themselves, and he's just sitting there and he's like, ah. And you're like, I didn't do it quite right, but it's like because he's alone, that final little utterance he makes is like the expression of like, shit,
Yeah.
this sucks. That he wouldn't really express when there were other people around.
Yeah. I mean, it is fairly common for spouses in long-term marriages, to not survive
Mm-hmm.
very much longer after they lose their spouse. Like that is
Yeah.
pretty common. And it's just because like, what is life now? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like my kids are gone. My wife is gone. These are the things that I've committed my entire life to. you're probably retired by then too, so you're not working. It's just like what is existence at this point? And that's something he's obviously trying to figure out here, although he could never say it. Um, I do think I want to talk about this briefly with you because I do think something that Ozu is doing here is I do think he's making a commentary on how like modernity has kind of fractured the familial relationship in this way. Like
Hmm.
this is the difference of them living in this quaint town versus the kids live in Tokyo.
Yeah.
The modern work ethic has we have to I have to work, I can't get off, I have to do this, I have to do this. I It's a Sunday and yet I still need to go into work instead of hanging out with you. I do, and there's a lot of shots in this that are like the like these kind of beautiful like scenery shots juxtaposed with a big boat in the middle of them, like
Hmm.
like this beautiful natural scenery and this modern thing in the
Hmm.
center of the frame. And so I don't know if you agree with me on that, but I do feel like this movie is making a commentary on that we're talking about the way that like perhaps in the olden days this kind of splintering of family and this pulling away from parent and child would not have been quite as dramatic as it is in the modern times of the 1950s.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I think maybe that's less clear to us because for us, modernity is the norm, and so for us,
Sure.
it tends to feel more like a film that's just about the way our lives are now, which is
Yeah.
atomized, and our parents are far away usually.
Hmm.
Um, but definitely, I definitely was noticing the costuming choices quite a lot,
Yeah.
because the children would always be wearing, well, no, see, it isn't actually consistent. Like the male children are usually wearing suits and
Suits. Yeah. Yeah.
Western clothes, and the female children are often wearing more traditional clothes. And then the parents kind of go back and forth, where sometimes
Hmm.
they'll both be wearing traditional clothes. The mom is pretty much always wearing traditional clothes. The dad sometimes is wearing a suit, and it's interesting because it's like they're being pulled into this other world that's, you know, I don't know,
Yeah.
doesn't fit. And I do feel like it's being communicated with the costuming.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was paying attention to that too. There's also this really, basically every character in this movie at almost all times is using a fan,
Hmm. Hmm.
which just like it looks like everyone's so hot and miserable the whole time. I feel so bad for them. It's just so fucking hot. And the one interesting kind of juxtaposition to that to me was in the scene. I think they're having dinner after the funeral. Um, and there's an electric fan in that scene.
Mm.
Um,
Hmm.
and I know there's an electric fan in that scene because the sound is mixed to where the electric fan that's in the kind of the foreground of the frame is making this like repeated like loud clunking noise. Like it's a very loud fan in that scene.
Hmm.
And that's how I originally noticed it because it's kind of just I think Ozu puts a lot of stuff in the foreground. Like he frames his scenes very particularly. I think we talked about that with Kurosawa. I think he did the same thing, but he frames his scenes very particularly with stuff always foregrounded. And the fan was in the foreground and just kind of to me lost until I just like, what is this clunking noise? What is this struggling? It's like, oh, it's this electric fan. It's the first time we've seen a non-hand fan in the whole movie, and it is in the sequence in which all the children are gathered with their father and are kind of deciding to move on, basically to leave. That they're that well, we've been here long enough. Better get the train. You wanna get the train too? Oh yeah, don't forget to give me that kimono. All right, I'm out of here. And then in the middle of this is this clunking of this electric modern fan. I don't know that it spoke to me in some way.
I love that. I didn't consciously notice the fan, but I like my brain remembers that now that you're pointing it out to me. And that all juxtaposed with like the sort of the mechanical inhumanity of the train and the fan. And
Yeah. Hmm.
there actually, yeah, there's some shots of just the train, and it strikes you as kind of like this. Obviously this is what the train actually looks like, so it's not like this is a choice, but it's like this sort of black uh, uh industrial looking it's not the Hogwarts Express train. It's like a piece of pig iron hammered into the shape of a train. It's
Hmm.
just shot in a way that it feels like it's belching smoke and making noise, and it's just unwelcome in this landscape, um, which is interesting. I don't
Yeah.
know, just remarkable, filmmaking. I guess is maybe that's why people like this movie.
Yeah, I think it's kind of everything we talked about. To be honest with you, I just like I think there have been moments throughout this whole blind spots thing that I've been like, I see why this is important to the history of filmography and filmmaking, and understand why this is beloved by critics. But I was pretty cold on it,
Mhm, mhm.
and then there are things like this where I'm just watching this movie and I'm like, oh yeah, this is just a masterpiece. Like this is just a flat out masterpiece of a film. And once again, a film about nothing, but yet a film about just like captures the core of what the human condition is. Like just I, I don't know what else to say with that. It's just like I was just like kind of in awe of this, just like watching a master just kind of go.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean it's a slow movie, right? Like I mean it is like you have to give it some time, you have to give it some patience, because like you said, like so much of who these characters are and like what their relationships with each other are is kind of difficult to piece through at the beginning, because you have the actual children, and then you have their spouses, where those spouses are and you don't it's not clear like who's related to who. You have to kind of parse that out as you go. And so I think the first 20-30 minutes of the film are probably the most difficult to watch, just because you're trying to understand what like what all these dynamics are. But once you kind of slot into that, I think it just kind of moves.
Yeah, I will say that was is not a criticism, but it did make it kind of hard to enter into the film's world, where it is just not holding your hand through
No.
some of these situations where you're just having to be like, okay, that's their son, okay, and then that's their daughter-in-law. I get, yeah, okay, okay, okay.
Mhm.
They're calling because, and it really, it's funny because they'll the daughter-in-law will also call them mom and dad, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, wait a second, hold on. But you do figure it out eventually.
Yeah.
You figure, I'm pretty sure that I would pass a test on who is actually the child and who is the in-law.
Yeah.
Um, but it takes a while, especially at first. But like that's some of the naturalism actually, is like on the script level, it kind of feels like somebody set up some hidden cameras in the house of this
Mhm.
family. It doesn't feel like a script. I mean, obviously, totally, 100% is like a tightly written script, and it's super well organized at the thematic level, but it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I agree. I think this is complicated where you when you pull up the Wikipedia page for this, and they've got a family tree
yeah, yeah,
on the Wikipedia page, and then next to a picture of one scene where all the kids are in the picture, just like this one's like uh, it doesn't hold your hand. It doesn't hold your hand with any of this. Like there's a lot of this you have to read into, not just not just just because you're kind of coming in media res in this whole family dynamic, but just because you the no one says what they mean, and so you have to be paying attention. I do wonder in that regard, like this is one of those things with never watching foreign films, is like, am I losing something in the translation? Some of the more subtle, like brilliant choices in screenwriting, to convey things, like how much of that gets lost in the translation. Like I wonder, the line that really jumped out at me that I already told you about was like, so happy to be sitting in my dead son's bed. And I'm like, I wonder what that sounded like
yeah.
in Japanese. Like what the, because like reading a subtitle of that just like almost made me laugh,
Right.
because it's just so kind of whoa. um but so like I do, there is, I feel like, always a little bit of something lost. Like you're never just going to be able to get the pure experience
Yeah.
of the thing when it's being translated.
I do feel like that was particularly true in this case because it was so the script is so like colloquial.
Mm.
I'm not sure what exactly the right word is to use here, but like so much of what they're saying is not even being translated into subtitles. This is something
Yeah, that's
I
true.
was noticing. Like, I don't know a ton of Japanese, but I know all of the like typical sort of filler things. Ah, so desu ne, where it's like it's just a thing to say to acknowledge you heard the other person said something, and so much of the movie is that kind of stuff, and they don't even bother translating it. They're just, like
Hmm.
very, very often they will just leave out whatever the person said in response, because it's the kind of thing where if you were reading it, if you're reading the back and forth of it, it would actually be kind of weird in a subtitle context.
Hmm.
I mean, it's um, you know, kind of every screenwriter points out that like people don't talk in movies the way they talk in real life, and that's kind of why subtitles work as a concept, is that
Hmm.
people speak to each other in complete sentences in movies, and thus you can do the subtitles and have that work. But in real life, people, leave sentences half finished. They interrupt each other constantly. They say, they talk over each other in sort of interchanges of politeness, which is so much of what's happening in this movie, where it's like the actual words that are said are sort of irrelevant to the subtext, which is like they're competing to see who's going to be more polite, and that's the one who won. And so we sort of literally changed what was actually said, and we just write something simpler in the subtitle.
Uh-huh.
And so yeah, like a lot of information out of all the movies that we've watched with subtitles, which is quite a few. This was the one where I noticed the most, just like, oh, they're not even really trying to accurately subtitle this. They're just sort of giving like, this is what you should be getting from this interaction, basically.
Yeah.
um,
I do think it's a testament to the quality of the film, though, that like while I felt that what you're saying here, and I think you felt it with a little bit more specificity than I did because you understand a little bit more Japanese than I do. Um, like I still think that the over like I don't feel like I missed the message of the film. Still, like I feel like I lost a little bit of some of the genius of the intricacies of the dialogue and the interactions. I feel like I did lose some of that, but I think and that bums me out because I enjoyed it so much. But overall, I think the film it miraculously
mm,
conveys its message.
yeah.
Even when with subtitles.
I would go so far as to say that it would still be an enjoyable watch if you turn the subtitles off and you just listen to it in Japanese, because you'll get the performances and the intonation, and probably be able to pick up on the subtext of what's happening, especially if you've already watched the movie once and you and
It's a
you
fun
you know what the
experiment. I
scenes
kind
are
of want
about.
to try that.
Like, doesn't that sound like it has something going for it? Because I mean,
Yeah.
there's so much of human communication that is not the words, right? And this is like, I don't know, maybe the number one movie for like communication that is not actually, well, what's being communicated in this scene is not actually the words that people are saying, because
Hmm.
they're just saying a bunch of polite filler.
Yeah.
um and you don't even need to know what they're saying, actually.
No, you're so right. You're so right. I think you were talking earlier about how there is no kind of big dramatic like reveal moment. Like no, I think Oscar moment would be
Hmm.
the way to uh, describe it. But I do think like there is like one moment of I think actual real pathos that at the conclusion, which is between the father and his daughter-in-law, the widowed wife
Yeah,
of his son.
yeah.
Like that final conversation there, still has a lot of like a lot of what we're talking about here, but it also is him kind of genuinely expressing himself as clearly as anyone has been in the entire movie. Like he's just like, hey, just like see, like my wife told me how nice you were to her,
Uh-huh.
and like I really appreciate that. And it's weird that you're the only one that was nice to us the
Uh-huh.
entire time we were here, and I worry about you, and I genuinely want you to find happiness and fulfillment, like all the things he should probably be saying to his children.
Uh-huh.
um but he can't, and
Right.
that I think that is the interesting dynamic of this whole thing is like perhaps there's something about the parent child relationship that just makes it so like you just can't fucking have those conversations.
Yeah.
And yet this is a guy who manages to have that conversation with his daughter-in-law um, kind of easily. And
Yeah.
also, we haven't talked about, but like the random neighbor that comes at the very end of the movie, like we talked about the thing he says to her, that's an incredibly like revealing, like emotional thing to say in that moment.
Yeah.
Is like, yeah, I like if I had known this is the way things were going to go, I probably would have treated her better while she lived. Like that's a that's a big thing to say.
Yeah.
And he's saying it to just some random woman
Yeah.
that that sticks her head through the door, not his children.
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
like I think there's a point to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, well said. He didn't say that to his children who just left.
Yeah.
He waits until they're all gone, and then he finally says that.
So that cathartic moment of pathos has to happen only with the only character in the story that is not blood related to him. I think is intentional for sure.
I think that's totally it, because even the thing that he's kind of asking of her, he's sort of I'm sure that he doesn't mean this in anything like a hurtful way, but he's sort of saying like, go be somebody else's responsibility. And like, I know he doesn't mean it in like, I'm tired of you being my daughter-in-law, but it is sort of saying like, go find a new husband, and then you'll be somebody else's daughter-in-law. You won't, and you won't be my daughter-in-law anymore.
That's true. That's true.
And like, that's, in a sense, that's why he's able to have that conversation with her. Is it's like, this is a sort of musical chairs type situation. You're not actually my daughter. And thus I can say this to you. If you were actually my daughter, I could never be this blunt or frank or communicative with you.
No, that's a great point. That's a great point. Oh my God, what a movie. I have absolutely loved having this conversation with you.
Yeah, me too.
This has been really great. This is, I mean, I think at the whole end of this thing, we're going to rank them. I don't think we're going to pay special attention to the ranking, but I just want to, at the very end, have an overview of all the 11 movies we've watched. And I feel like this has been one of my favorites for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, right in this moment, it kind of feels like that's true. It's funny. The first like, I don't know, hour of the movie, maybe I was like, not really quite feeling this, and then and I think that was just an artifact of me approaching it with the wrong mindset, and then it eventually getting what it was doing, and then I had changed my mind and decided I loved it before we sat down to talk, but this conversation has only made me love it even more.
I mean, I think that's totally fair though. Like if you sit down watching this movie expecting it to be like a normal movie, I think there is some level of like, okay, but when is a thing going to happen?
Right. Like you think they're going to go to the bathhouse or whatever the thing is that their kids have sent them to, and then like plot is going to happen at the bathhouse.
No.
And it's like, no, it was just kind of disappointing.
It's a little loud. It's a little loud. We're going to come home. It was a little loud.
They would have been happier if they could just hang out with their kids, but their kids are like, well, this is a treat. This is a treat for you.
Yeah.
And they're like, that's not really why we're here. And can't say any of that, of course.
Yeah, and the like the idea of like the talk about money, I think, is really fascinating too. We haven't really talked about this, but like the parents are kind of always like, "Oh, you're spending too much. Like we don't need all this." And then like, but on the flip side is when she comes home with like, was it cakes or something? And like she comes home with cakes for the parents, and like I think her husband, I think this is the daughter and the daughter-in-law and the son. She comes home with cakes for him, and he's like, "Oh, these cakes are way too expensive for them. You shouldn't have done this. Like just crackers is good enough for them." And she's like, "They had crackers yesterday." And the whole time they're having this discussion, they're both chowing down on the expensive cakes, like that they're saying are too expensive for their parents. Like stuff like that is just fucking great.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that is funny. There's maybe this is the same conversation, maybe not, where they're like, we should get some some steak, and they're like, yeah, and they're like, and maybe some sashimi, and they're like, no, just steak.
Yeah, let's not go too far here. Yeah. No, I mean there is kind of an awkward thing with money and parents, right? Like I like when you're younger, your parents spend money on you constantly, like because you're a kid and you don't have it, and then you grow up and you have money, and it's like you don't you want to be able to provide for your parents like they provided for you, but there's this complicated thing with like, well, no, because like I'm older still, and like I just especially with in-laws, or it's like I want to pay for you, my in-laws, because I can afford that. And it's like, no, I want to pay, but you don't want to like be the person that has the fight about paying for the
Right.
check. And so like it's just this whole kind of weird interaction
Yeah.
that doesn't happen exactly like that in this movie, but it's like the specter of money hovers over this whole thing.
Money and like obligation being
Yeah.
unclear. Like this is one thing that the movie, it's in there, but it's one thing that I was paying a lot of attention to, because back when you just kind of lived in the same village your whole life, and then your children lived in the same village their whole life, and
Hmm.
so on and so on. Like, um I think that the obligation was a two-way street, actually, especially
Sure.
I think in Japanese culture and other cultures, but really in all cultures, in all cultures where before the Industrial Revolution, let's say, it was like the parents take care of the kids when the kids are little tiny babies, and then the kids take care of the parents when the parents are old. And
Hmm.
and there's a felt sense of obligation where, like, not only will you be condemned by your community if you don't take care of your parent, but I think that people back then used to actually feel this sense of like duty toward their
Hmm.
parent. And I think it's really interesting to me because, like, I'm just gonna be like honest here. Like, while I love my parents, the 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 maximum amount that one can love their parents, I don't feel like a sense of like duty to take care of them in their old age. And
Hmm.
like I I will if I have to.
Yeah.
But I'm probably sounding like a huge asshole here. Like, the point is, like,
No, no.
it's not the ties of like obligation and like the norms around your obligation towards your parents, I think, have sort of disintegrated to the point where we watch our parents' generation take care of their parents, or react to the decline of their parents, let's say.
Yeah.
And it's like every baby boomer has to like discover for the first time, like, oh shit, what am I supposed to do? Because there's no structures.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's the same for us. It's like, what are the expectations? What am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
Like inevitably, the position I'm inevitably going to be put in, what am I expected to do, and what am I going to, I don't even know. Like, I'm going to, like, you only hope that you're going to react with grace and poise and do the right thing, but
Yeah.
like there's no like template for this anymore.
Yeah.
um and like you've got your siblings living scattered out across the country, right? It's like,
Hmm.
what the hell am I supposed to do with that? Like,
Yeah.
you used to be, you could just, like, the situation would just sort of sort itself out naturally, right? I don't know.
Uh-huh.
I'm rambling now, but this is kind of in the movie too. Is the point, like, the fact that the children are kind of living all over the place, and
Yeah.
it's not convenient for any of them to be like, oh yeah, of course you can come, stay with me if you need to, or whatever. It's doesn't work
Yeah.
anymore.
And the daughters kind of talk about how, if the father had died first, and mother, like, we would take her to Tokyo and take
Hmm.
care of her there. Like, that's a thing that is very easy to say, knowing that is never going to happen now. But like, in practicality and actuality, if that's the way things had played out, would that be what actually happened? And I think you're led to believe maybe, probably not. Like, it is like, and it's, again, I don't hate the children
Hmm.
characters, right? I find them very believable, and very sympathetic in a lot of ways, of like, yeah, like, you have your life and your kids, and like, this is a full-time job managing your shit. And then, like, even if you have that feeling of obligation towards your parents, like, that's just another thing you're throwing on the pile. That's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And like, it's understandable that you would be a little exasperated about that. It's understandable that, like, if you see a way out of it, to send them off to a spa
Hmm.
for half the visit, and then you feel good because you're flexing your financial ability to give them something, so you feel like that's meeting part of your obligation to take care of them. But you also get to kind of carry on with the responsibilities and the duties you have in your everyday life as well. Like, it's
Hmm.
very understandable. That's feels like real emotion and real like interpersonal conflict. I don't know. It's just it's why I don't hate any of these kids.
Yeah. It's we spent a lot of our time as podcast co-hosts talking about like morality and like utilitarianism and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
it's funny how none of that like works here, because it's never clear. Like it's never clear what is the right thing to do here. It's like, well, it's not like it's morally wrong for me to not spend time with my parents, but like, because I have to like make money and keep myself alive, but at the same time I do want to, and it's like these are the mundane moral conundrums that we actually encounter throughout our lives. Very rarely are there any trolley problems. It's always these things where it's just unclear. It's just like you're just like torn, Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
I great movie, love it.
No, I totally agree. Sorry, I was processing what you were saying, but yeah, like just the fact that we can have these conversations about this kind of stuff and have the conversations. What I love is from a place of like, I don't feel judgment, like from you, or I hope vice versa, that like we're having these, and I don't think we're really even specifically talking about our parents. Like we're not, because we haven't had to go through any of these situations yet. We will perhaps one day, but we haven't yet. And I don't know. It's just this fascinating, complex. Like I am kind of in a place where I'm really obsessed with the exploration of that really interesting dynamic that is adult child and parent,
Yeah,
and how that works and how you navigate that, because it's different. Like you're a parent, you spend 2 decades like seeing this person every day, molding them, creating them, hoping to turn them into a good person that can be successful and happy in this world. And then they go off and then they have another life and you're still part of it, but not a huge part of it. Like hopefully a decent part of it, but it's just different. And it's just like I right now I have small kids, right? And I'm imagining like this is the closest I'm ever going to be with my children, because I have to be out of necessity to keep them alive and to take care of and parent them. And like it's just imagining, well, this is this person that you love an incredible amount and you see every day and you're with, and it's such a huge part of your life right now. And what if I told you in 20 years you're going to see him once a month, and maybe you'll detect this mild annoyance that they are having to interrupt their weekend of relaxation to hang out with you for a few hours. Like that's not going to feel great.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there. I mean, there's just the simple fact that like, the baby that you're in love with is replaced by this toddler, and of course you love the toddler, but where'd the baby go? And then the toddler is replaced by the little kid, and this is a delightful evolution, but where'd the toddler go? And that kind of never stops, and then eventually you're talking to, some professional person across a table having a beer, and it's like, this is nice, this is a cool guy, but where'd my child go? And like I'm like painfully aware of the reality of that while like looking at my children, and so it makes you, it kind of weirds you out if you think about it too much, so I just try not to.
Yeah. I mean, fortunately, I have a very long time before I have to deal with any of that. You have less time.
I have less time.
Still a fair amount of time.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, it's not like it's like some tragedy, because at every point you're like, this is awesome. But there is that awareness of like, this is different,
It's different. Yeah, it's very different. And you're just rolling with that difference. I love that this movie allowed us to have all these conversations. Like this makes me so happy, and I'm so thankful to this movie. And like we are coming to an end on blind spots now. We do have one more, which is, I just thought it'd be fun that we could finish this whole thing out by watching what they voted the number one film of all time, because neither of us had seen it, so it just feels like a perfect way to end this whole thing. But like this has been one of my favorite ongoing series we've done, because it's just like, we normally would like never pick movies like this normally. And we kind of set up constraints to force ourselves to pick some of these things. And it's been really rewarding for me.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really glad we did this.
Yeah. All right, but that's going to be next week where we conclude with a 3-hour French film. So I hope you're I hope you're ready for it.
I'll prepare.
All right. Anything else you wanted to say about Tokyo Story?
Nope.
All right. That is it. Please, if you listen to this whole conversation and are still like, should I go watch this movie? Yes, do it, please.
Yeah.
I beg of you.
Yeah.
Doof.
All right, Matt. These are the results of our Canon episode. If you recall, 2, maybe 3 weeks from now, or weeks ago, we did a Canon episode on the film Big Fish. You and I, pretty cold on the film overall. Did not really enjoy it. I re-listened to that episode, and it's like, I don't know. I feel like I'm always surprisingly more critical than I thought I was going to be. Like, I didn't love the movie, but like, you listen to that, you're like, oh geez, did I hate the movie?
Sometimes we start with a movie we're kind of in the middle on, and then we convince ourselves that we love it by the end.
Mm-hmm.
It's less often that we do the opposite, where we convince ourselves that it actually sucked. And I think that's what happened this time, where I actually ended up ranting more than I even thought I was going to. But anyway, what were the results?
The results were as mixed as we were, because it was straight down the middle, 50-50.
Wow.
I don't know if this has ever happened on the Canon, but our plan for this, if it was to happen, is we don't ever add our votes into the overall vote. But if there is a tie, that's when we, the vice president of the council, get to break the tie.
Seems only appropriate.
Yeah. And so in this case, I think it will surprise no one to learn that we're going to go with no on this one. So sorry, Big Fish, not in the Canon. Is there a Burton movie worthy of Canon in your mind?
I mean, the first thing that jumps to my mind is Batman Returns.
We should do an episode on Batman Returns. It's a Christmas film too.
It is.
Let's see if we can because we have to do an episode this month. Let's see if we can like nudge our council and be like, hey, you guys want to do two Tim Burtons in a row? Let's talk about Batman Returns.
Yeah, give him a shot. Let him redeem himself.
We'll see what we can do. But yeah, I think we got a lot of good feedback on this one, because this is a movie that is very well liked. I think this is kind of one of the ones that we disliked the most, that is a genuinely like enjoyed film. And so like, it's always the fun thing where you post the episode and like, people on YouTube are like, oh sweet, I love this movie. And you're like, oh, I can tell you haven't listened to the episode yet. But no one said anything mean. I want to be clear. Like, there was no one that were rude or mean to us. But like there's a lot of good feedback. Like, I think one of the things we talked about, how it's like, we really wanted this to be a movie in which both the father and son like learn about each other a little bit more and maybe change and grow. And the thing that really frustrated us was that like that only really happened on one side, is that like the son learned, oh, that's just him, that's just dad, and the dad basically learns absolutely nothing. But like, I think there is an argument to be made there that like that's an okay plot of a film, is like, my father is dying, I'm desperately trying to get to know him, and I feel like right before he dies, I do get to understand him a little bit more, and he learns nothing. He doesn't become a good dad suddenly. I don't have a moment where he says, I always loved you, son, and I'm sorry for treating you like shit. But you do get the gift of, ever so briefly, getting to understand your father, and you get to carry that forward into the rest of your life. So I mean, that there's something there. I get that.
Yeah, I think I can kind of articulate all of the rambling that I did in that last episode into one short, summation of my critique, which is that it's fundamentally a tonal mismatch between what the movie feels like it's trying to accomplish and what it actually is showing on the screen. And ultimately, it's a movie that feels like it's trying to make you love this Edward Bloom character and think he's totally rad, but like nothing that happens in the movie lines up with that. And so it's just a clash, and you're like, wait a minute, like what? Yeah, that's the gist of it. And
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
I almost just wonder if this is just a problem in just like not even in execution, but just in like principle of the story that is wanting to be told here. Like that you just can't do it this way if that's what you're trying to do. Like you can't make a story about this kind of lovable scamp of a storyteller if your point is he was kind of an asshole and I never understood him. Um, but now through his stories, I can understand him a little bit more. Like it just doesn't. I think you're absolutely right that tonally it's just kind of broken,
Yeah,
and I don't
right.
know if there's a way to fix it.
No, I mean, I think there the we made a bunch of suggestions last episode, but I think like the one thing you could do to fix it is just make it so that they didn't have this horrible relationship as adults for reasons that were entirely on Bloom's side.
Yeah,
Like you're just frustrated. You're like he sucks.
yeah. Like the reason for their falling out is not something that is clearly the father's fault, and the son is completely rational and being upset about it. Like taking
Right.
over your toast at my wedding to tell a story about you and not me is like a fucked up thing to do, and is like a perfect example of the type of father he's been the whole time. So yeah,
Yeah.
like I I don't know. I think it is just kind of his in my mind just kind of broken, and
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I think it's a mismatch to Burton's style. Um, it's just a weird movie. It's just a weird movie.
Yeah, it does stick out from his normal thing that he does. And once
Yeah,
again, I totally get everybody who likes the movie.
yeah.
I think I
Like we
said
said,
this
it made us
already.
cry at the end, right?
Yeah.
Like I think this is the perfect example of stick the landing, and people will forgive you for everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I may have actually liked this movie when I was younger, and I just sort of something clicked in my brain. Um, Perhaps literally just being a father made me reconceptualize the way Edward Bloom was treating his son, and then that
Yeah.
ruined the movie for me. It's entirely possible. I never
I
actually thought
mean,
about that.
you essentially made the same argument about Benjamin Button, right? Which is
Hmm.
this idea that the thing he does near the end of that movie is basically say, well, I'm aging backwards and eventually you're going to have to take care of me like I'm a little baby. And so in order to avoid that eventuality, I'm just going to abandon my young child for no reason.
Right.
And that pissed you off, rightfully so. My argument was and will remain, I think that's the point. I think it is a film that is trying to like deconstruct the mythos of youth is wasted on the young, that like even if you are a man who has lived for 60 years in the body of a 20-year-old, you're still kind of a fucking idiot.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
it's still a good point.
Well, and that can be true, and I can still be mad at the movie about it.
Oh yeah, certainly.
So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I forgot to say, I think on the episode, like the funniest thing that this movie has that
Uh-huh.
we didn't talk about, which is that the band Yellow Card.
Uh-huh.
Do you know Yellow Card? They're the
I know that
California
you were
punk rock
really into
band.
Yellow Card when we were in college, and
I was. I
it was a
enjoyed them a
thing.
lot.
Yeah. Okay.
They wrote a song about this movie.
Uh-huh.
They wrote a song called How I Go.
Uh-huh.
Now, the funny thing about this is it's not like an official tie-in to the movie. It's just like the band Yellow Card really liked Big Fish
That's great.
and said, we're gonna write a song about Big Fish in, importantly, 2006.
Uh-huh.
When the movie came out in 2003. And it's like, all right, guys, we need to pad out this album. I watched this movie last night. It's like the Michael Bolton SNL skit where all he wants to do is sing about Captain Jack Sparrow. It's like that exact thing. I'm just like, I watched Big Fish and I really want to just talk about
Uh-huh.
Big Fish for a while. So I made a whole song about Big Fish.
That's great. I love it. I'm so happy that people do weird stuff like that. It's great.
Oh, so everyone go listen to How I Go by Yellow Card. It's not a bad song. It's just funny to me. Like the first time I heard it, I was like listening to the lyrics and I was like, is this about big fish? And yes, it is.
I never actually got around to listening to that. But I will.
It does have a line at the end of it that I think is like better than the movie, by the way. The lyric in the song is, "Son, I am not everything you thought that I would be, but every story I have told is part of me. Son, I leave you now, but you have so much more to do, and every story I have told is part of you." And I'm like, hey, that's great, and I wish the movie had communicated that better.
Yeah, wow, what a great thematic statement in a piece of derivative work. That's great.
Yeah. So that's a Big Fish and How I Go by Yellow Card. Also had a 9/11 song on that album, by the way, in 2006. So
that's wow, what an album. I gotta check that out. This kind of reminds me, I think just because of the fact that we're talking about college, about how I always thought that My Chemical Romance line, "You get what everyone else gets, you get a lifetime," was a great line. And then I later realized that it was just from fucking Sandman. the Neil Gaiman comic.
Yeah.
Anyway,
knowledge is a curse. You learn things and they just ruin them.
Yeah.
Man, we heard that album so much.
We did.
That My Chemical Romance album, because Michael loved that album.
Yeah.
It was a good album, but man, he played that nonstop.
Yeah, every song on that album was burned into my mind, not willingly.
And is it the type of thing where like you have a like a sense memory of where you hear it, like you remember like being in the dorm, sitting on the couch, or being in your room and hearing it through the wall?
Yes, I'm like, as you're saying this, I'm like remembering like what color things were. And
doof. All right, Matt, let's move on. I just wanted to briefly talk to you about our ongoing series on the streaming wars, I guess.
Okay. This streaming knife fight in a ditch.
Yeah. So obviously, like the strikes are officially over, right? The Actors Guild voted, I think, just like 2 days ago, to ratify the deal to end the strike. By the way, only passed with 77% of the vote, which is very different from the Writers Guild, 99% of the vote that passed on theirs. A lot of actors unhappy about the AI portions of that deal, by the way.
Interesting.
They think that they basically wanted no AI ever, no likeness ever type stuff, which is kind of just unreasonable.
Yeah, not realistic. And I think I'm on the record as saying that I'm like pleased and impressed with the deal that they actually got.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway, so the thing's over, and we're looking at this landscape where all these big media companies are like, okay, what do we do now? Because we don't have any money. and like we can't acquire because they can't finance those deals because interest rates are so high right now that like money is super expensive. So I think what we're going to see here, and I think we're already starting to do it, is what I'm calling the great bundling of 2024. So I think we're going to see consolidation, but more than consolidation, I think we're going to see these companies start to get together and bundle things, because the data shows that bundling is actually a very successful way to reduce bounce rate. That when you force people to bundle 3 things together, they are much less likely to quit services month to month and manage them. Like if you just have Netflix, it's a lot easier to cancel Netflix when you're not watching anything and start up Netflix again when something comes. And these services have super high bounce rates. So they want to get that down, and bundling does that. So the thing that we've learned very recently is that Paramount Plus and Apple are in talks to bundle their services together. Now, this is not Apple buying Paramount, important to say. This is just 2 existing companies saying, hey, why don't we offer a deal where you pay one fee to one group, and you get both of our services. I think this is going to happen a lot next year and the year after that. It's going to happen a lot, actually. I would not be surprised if by the end of this whole thing, there's like a big old bundle that has like 5 or 6 things in it.
Yeah, I agree. I guess I should have called this in advance so that I get some credit for it. But I think it was always sort of, there's a lot of reasons. It's number, like you said, number one, people don't want to be paying for 8 different streaming services, and that was always true. And so it solves that problem. But also it's to the advantage of these content providers to actually be able to collect more data on your viewing habits,
Yeah, no,
because
certainly.
then they can actually give you better recommendations. And so if most of what you're watching is on one platform, let's say, rather than spread across 8 platforms, then they can actually give you better recommendations, which then keeps you on the platform better,
Hmm.
but also keeps you a happy customer. Like you're actually having a better time with it, like in an actual first person sense. So it just makes it a better product. So it's kind of what we all want.
Hmm. This, by the way, reminds me. I just got a new laptop, and when I was setting it up the other day, um, it basically said, "Do you want to turn on like ad detection stuff? You know, where it like can sense your habits and give ads more targeted to you?" And I was like, "No."
Hmm.
And I clicked turn it off, and the message that popped up said, "You're still going to get the same amount of ads. They'll just be less relevant to you." It's
Right.
like, oh, fuck you.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Turn it on. Fine.
Yeah. I've turned myself over to the minds at this point. I'm just like, yeah,
I just, I appreciate the honesty. It's like, oh, this isn't going to stop you from getting ads. By the way, it's
yeah,
just that maybe 1 in 5 of the ads you'll go, huh? Okay, I'll take that.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But anyway, yeah. I mean, I do think this is just what where we're going. This is what's going to happen. I do think there's going to be some consolidation as well as bundling. I think some companies are going to buy some other companies next year. I think right now we're just a matter of like, how are we going to finance the stuff? Where does this money come from? Who's going to get involved in it and things like that. But you look at like the Paramount Pluses, the Peacocks. Like you look at these things and you're like, they've lost. Like they've lost the fight. They're not, and they need to just peel them off or give them to someone or do something, because they can't hold on to these assets. And it's just they're not making any money at all. I mean, if
yeah,
Disney is struggling to make any money off of their service, like how is Paramount Plus going to make money?
yeah. Right. I don't think they ever were going to. I think it was like
Mhm.
I think it was sort of akin to something we talked about a few weeks ago, where it's like sometimes in business you have to take fights you can't win, because
Yeah.
you don't actually have the option to just it's like you can die now, or you can pick a fight you're not going to win, and businesses in general will choose to pick the fight they're not going to win rather than die now.
Sure. Yeah.
um so
Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting. I don't know where this shakes out. One thing that also happened this week that I thought was interesting was the like indie darling studio A24
mhm.
signed an exclusivity deal with Max, that all A24 films after their theatrical run are going to stream exclusively on Max. That's the type of thing where like me as a consumer that can't go to the movies very often right now am like, fuck yeah, I have a subscription to that service. This means I'm definitely going to get to watch more of these films as they hit streaming quicker. I love it, but it's also like it's it's a terrible relation. Like Max to the creator is like one of the worst services out there that exists. I don't know if you heard about like there's a whole they where they pulled the Batman or Batgirl movie and just said, this isn't gonna make any money. We're gonna use it as a tax write off.
Uh-huh.
Well, they did that with another movie. It was a John Cena acne movie. I forget what it was called. It was called like Acme versus Coyote or something.
Oh my god, never heard of
So,
this.
so they were Coyote versus Acme. So it was basically like I think a half animated, half live action thing, like similar to Roger Rabbit. The movie was done. It ready to go, and Warner Brothers was just like, no, we feel we'll make more money off of this as a tax write-off than if we actually spend the money
Oh my
to push it and release it. And so like that's the company that A24 is about to go into
Uh-huh.
business with. But like I do think this is going to be this really weird thing of these businesses are kind of desperate to make money, and they're going to start doing things. Like I think Disney has said, Bob Iger at Disney has specifically said they're going to like pull back on the messaging, quote unquote, in their Disney films, which is basically like, we feel that our movies are not making as much money because we have alienated half the country
Uh-huh.
by being more progressive, which like I don't love hearing that. But like I think these are things that it's going to happen, right? Like they
Yeah.
want to maximize like it does not serve Disney's interest at all to target 50% of their demographic.
Yeah. Well, they make everybody mad anyway because even when they're being more progressive, they're not being progressive in like their correct way. So like
That
there's
true.
they can't win actually.
True. Yeah.
Um, so I
So I don't know. It's just gonna be weird. I really hope like we get to have this conversation again a year from now, which I'm sure we will, and just like remember this moment and be like, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen in 2024? Companies are gonna buy companies. I've heard this rumor that Apple's gonna buy Disney. I don't think Apple wants to do that. I
yeah.
don't think Apple wants to own Disney. I think Apple is very fine making all their money off of hardware and Apple Plus basically being like a rounding error on their balance sheet.
Yeah.
I think they're very happy in that situation.
I agree. I think they love having infinite profit margins, and I don't think
Yeah.
they particularly want to get bogged down in managing IP as a thing that they have to spend time thinking
No,
about.
absolutely not. So yeah, I don't think that's happening. I do think there's going to be a lot of like weird. I think you're going to see a lot of like venture capital groups and private equity groups that are going to show up and start making noise in these areas. And what will that look like? I don't know. Like, how will that change these studios? How will that change this stuff? I don't know. I don't. It's wild. It's the wild west of content is back. Who the fuck knows? Buy physical media because all of these companies could just rip all this stuff from your device whenever. There, I don't know if you saw this, but like, if you bought any like Warner Brothers Discovery stuff for your PlayStation, I guess the deal between Sony and Discovery has fallen through. So like all that stuff is just going to get wiped from your device. Just it's not yours anymore. Sorry.
So I heard a delightful take this week, which is if you can just take it off of my device, then that means I never owned it, which means that it isn't property, which means that pirating it isn't theft.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if it quite, hangs together, but it's a good thing to tell yourself when you're pirating things.
Yeah, and I generally don't support piracy, but I also like I totally understand the frustration. Like there are so many times, Matt, where we have to cover a movie or a TV show or something for the show where I pop it into the Just Watch app and I'm like, wait, this isn't available anywhere? What the fuck? Like my son has a Ghostbusters book and it's like they take the Ghostbusters story and they make it for kids, and it's actually it's a really terrible book because they just like pound quotes from the movie into the book at a level that like it just sounds awful when you read it out loud. It's not good. But like he's just all of a sudden got like obsessed with this book and the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man at the end of it. And so I was like, I'm gonna show him the real Stay Puft. I'm gonna just really quick turn on Ghostbusters and show him like the very end scene with the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. I'm like, I have it on disc, but like I just want to turn it on real quick for my son. I punch it in. Nowhere. It's nowhere. Anywhere it is, you have to rent it for like $5. It's not streaming anywhere. And like that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I own a lot of services.
Yeah, it's absurd.
It should be on one of them.
Yeah, it's one of the most beloved movies ever. It's just utterly insane that it wouldn't be.
Yeah. So I got out the disc and let him watch, and my wife judged me for it's like, I'm not letting him watch the whole movie.
Yeah. It's
just the part where they blow up the Marshmallow Man.
And, I think you got to have a couple of those movies in there to traumatize your kid. And I think that's a good one to traumatize the kid because it's not really that bad. It's
the dogs are scary.
The dogs are scary, but I don't remember ever being a kid and being like, oh, I can't, you'll get a drink of water at night because of the Ghostbuster dogs. They're scary in the moment. Is what I
mean, I definitely watched that movie when I was 5, like 5 or 6. Like I was still in New Jersey. We moved when I was 6. So it was pretty well before that. So it might have even been 4. So like, yeah, my son's 2.5. So maybe a little young, but
yeah,
I don't think he could sit through the entire movie. Like literally just just the part where they
Yeah.
bust the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
I guess, yeah, 2.5, they're not even like perceiving movies as sequences of narrative. They're just like,
yeah, I mean, he is and he isn't though. Like
mhm.
we've been watching a lot of the Pixar stuff with him.
Yeah.
And he like legitimately will sit on the couch or in our lap like the whole movie and watch it.
Yeah.
Like it's I'm pretty impressed.
Sure. Yeah. No, the Pixar movies are great.
Yeah. He really likes A Bug's Life, like a lot. Like
that's
probably the
cool.
weakest, in my opinion, of the Pixar movies. And
Isn't
it's
that
like
DreamWorks actually?
no, DreamWorks Ants is
Ants
DreamWorks.
is DreamWorks. Okay.
It's the Woody Allen is an ant one. That's DreamWorks.
That's
A Bug's
funny.
Life was Pixar's second movie.
I always get that wrong. Okay.
Because they came out like within a month of each other.
Yeah.
That's why you're confused.
Yeah, you're right.
And it just sounds like A Bug's Life would be the name of a Woody Allen movie in which he plays a bug.
It does. Or just any Woody Allen movie, really.
Yeah, true. Take that, Woody. Anyway, I think that's all I had for this week, Matt. Did you have anything else?
Nope.
All right.
Oh.
What?
I watched the entire season of Reacher, the TV show. But I don't need to talk about that at great length, other than to say that I really like The Punisher, and I'm glad that they made a TV show about it.
That can't be right.
And that
those are two different characters.
They kind of are. No, Reacher is a TV show that was made in a lab for me specifically. We're a large man with a superhero face kills men who deserve it for 8 or so episodes, and it's very satisfying.
And finally, they found someone to play Reacher that was not Tom Cruise, who was far too small to play that character.
Yeah, I mean that movie works because the movie, it doesn't hinge on the fact that he's an enormous giant man, but the TV show definitely does hinge on the fact that he's an enormous giant man. So
fair. No, that's fair.
That's it.
I like it. We did have one exciting announcement that we probably should have put at the top of the show, but hey, it's not like we're professionals or anything.
No.
Matt, what is our exciting announcement?
After decades, we have finally released the Doof merch store. If you head on over to doofmedia.myshopify.com,
you nailed it.
You will be graced with the glory of the Doof merch store. We have Kingslingers merch. We have Doof merch. We have a variety of silly little memes. We have a bunch of different cool products. It's all very fun. There's something there for everyone, whatever you're into. And we have to thank our listener Jody for helping us get this store set up. It was not something that we could have done on our own.
No.
We did intentionally try to get everything in place in time for people to order stuff for Christmas. Now, we barely did make it under the wire there. We had the store up a few days ago, but if you order stuff before December 10th, then it should arrive, assuming you're in the US, then it should arrive by Christmas.
Yeah.
We're new to this whole thing. No real guarantees, but that's the idea. And we're really happy with how it's going so far. I'm really happy with the store and the offerings and so forth. So
I am rocking my Doof hoodie right now.
Excellent.
It's a very solid hoodie. It's good quality. It came in the mail yesterday, I think, and I like it a lot. It's really good. I also got my mug today, and I basically wanted to buy one of everything, and I almost did, and then allowed myself to calm down a little bit and just bought like a couple things. But everything on there is really cool. The if you podcast me, then podcast me mug is just my favorite thing in the world, because no one is going to get that except for a very specific set of people. And I hope one day you're drinking that mug on a video work call and someone asks you what that means and you have to attempt to explain it to them. That's my goal in life.
Yes. All merch should really be impenetrably high context.
But yeah, check it out. It's good fun. We tried to price things as reasonable as possible. We're not making like a huge amount of money off of this. We just thought it would be something that's fun for people to enjoy and express their love for what we do here.
Yep.
All right. That is it. If you have any opinions on Tokyo Story, on Jack Reacher, or on the great bundling of 2024, as we're calling it now. You can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on X at doofmedia. You can also go to Reddit. That's reddit.com/r/doofmedia, where you will find a bunch of conversations about all the episodes we release and all the fun stuff we do.
That's right. And if you're not subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to subscribe, and that way you'll never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And if you want to support us, you can head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia, where you will be able to pledge at a bunch of different levels. We have a bunch of cool bonus podcasts we release every month. This week, Matt, you released your newest episode of Freeman Bros, the show you do with your brother Daniel, and you talked about AI and
the
technology and science, physics, stars,
anything else,
black holes.
We mainly talked about cooking, but as always, it takes us a while to get to the subject matter. But it's fun.
I already made this joke on a show, but I'm doing it again here. You just talked about cooking.
We talked about cooking. Cooking is an interesting topic.
I guess that's like chemistry.
Yeah. That's what Walter White says anyway.
Okay, wait. Is it about making meth? Is that like, did you make an episode about making meth? Just so I know, for legal purposes.
You'll just have to listen and see, Scott.
All right, well, you can find Matt and Daniel's meth episode and a bunch of other episodes over at patreon.com/doofmedia right now. There's tons of those. We have a bunch of other shows we do. Matt and I do Other Levels of the Tower, which is our Stephen King show. And then Elliot and Ruben do The High Ground, which I think, are they wrapping up or are they wrapped up with, they were doing Pride and Prejudice series. I don't know what they're doing next. I haven't talked to them about it yet, but they've got a bunch of cool content there. They started with the Star Wars movies, and then they did Jurassic Park and The Mummy and a bunch of other movies. Really fun episodes as well.
Yeah, movies like Star Wars, Pride and Prejudice, that space of movies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That lane. That's the lane they're going for.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, please consider giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Each review does help us get more exposure and introduce new people to the content that we make here.
That is right. And next week, as we said, we are going to be concluding our Blind Spot series. We have one final film, and it's titled Jeanne Dielman. It is a French film about, I believe she's a sex worker. I'm not 100% sure what this movie is about, Matt. I just know it's really good, apparently, and it's 3 hours long, and it's French. So we'll all find out together next week.
Perfect.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.